what is an independent India? Is it just an India without the British? Or is it an India where we can all freely celebrate our culture and heritage, live according to our own values, and have the right to refuse a foreigner's mindset imposed upon us? Usually, I make most of my videos in Hindi, or a little blend of Hindi and English if you will. But this video needs to be in English for two reasons. Firstly, because this video needs to be accessible to the entire nation. Until we all learn to speak Sanskrit, English is our next best option, unfortunately. Secondly, and more importantly, this video needs to be seen by our urban English-speaking elite who constantly advocate for human rights violations against other communities, but are woefully unaware of the existential crisis facing Hindu temples and the unfair and arbitrary control of Hindu temples by the Indian government. Now, we're all made to believe that India is home to some of the richest temples in the world. They're laden with land and gold. And the media runs articles like, if these 10 temples give away their wealth, India's poverty problem will be solved. And this impression is created that these temples are deliberately sitting on this large pile of wealth instead of using it to help the masses, as our gods and goddesses would want it. This narrative is pushed everywhere, in Bollywood, through TV shows, through popular music and culture and so on. And this is the one narrative that I personally find extremely strange, because this has never been true. And I don't know who has started this terrible rumor that our temples are sitting on a large pile of cash and land which they intend to use only for the benefit of our greedy priests. Because since 1817, temples have never actually gotten to keep the donations they make. All these donations were arbitrarily seized by the British, and now they're seized by the government of India. You see, today each state controls Hindu temples' funds through a Religious and Charitable Endowments Act. Depending on the state, these acts can either be regulatory or extremely draconian in nature. These laws were first introduced by the British in 1817 and have been carried forward by the Indian government under the garb of management and development of temples. The government seizes the wealth of Hindu temples and uses it to fund its own schemes or construction of flyovers, government offices, and many other projects that have absolutely nothing to do with the benefit of the temple. In short, the temple does not get to keep the donations it is given. But so what? Hinduism says Vasudev Kutumbakam, right? Which means the world is a family. So why should Hindus object to temple funds being used to run the nation? Plus, these flyovers, government offices, projects, schemes are actually helping people. So what's the problem in such funds being utilized for secular purposes? Well, there are three problems. Firstly, no other religious community is taxed the way Hindu temples are. So there's no Religious and Charitable Endowments department for mosques, churches, synagogues, gurudwaras, etc. So not only is such a system immoral, it is also unconstitutional because it taxes only Hindu institutions and violates Articles 19, 25 and 26 of the Constitution. Not to mention the fact that a secular government cannot constitutionally justify taking money from a religious institution to run a nation. Secondly, as a result of exclusively Hindu temples being taxed, Hindus are bearing the burden of national development more harshly than other communities. This nation is an equal home to non-Hindu communities as well, right? So it's only fair that all communities contribute equally to national development. Thirdly, because Hindu temples are dying, they do not have the resources to sustain themselves. As per an affidavit filed by the Tamil Nadu Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Department in 2020 before the Madras High Court, it said, out of 44,121 temples under government control in Tamil Nadu, 37,000 temples did not even have enough revenue to hire a caretaker. And out of these 37,000, 12,000 did not even have the money to perform a puja on a daily basis. These figures are very concerning. As a result of this, and you may not believe me when I say this, Hindus and their way of life are dying out. Now I understand why some people might be skeptical. How can Hindus be dying out? Hindus constitute a majority of this country's population. They are the ones in the positions of power. They're the last people under a threat of extinction. When I say Hindus are dying out, I don't mean that they're literally being killed through religious genocide or mass murder. Although India, along with its neighbors, has seen and continues to see a few Hindu genocides before and after independence. What I mean is that temples are the heart centers of Sanatan Dharma. While in ancient India, temples played an extensive role in Hindus' life, such as money lending, supporting local arts and crafts, sports and martial arts, education and scholarship, today, they are responsible for keeping the Hindu faith alive. You see, Hinduism is not like Abrahamic religions. There isn't one book, one set of practices, or even one god that Hindus worship. Hinduism is a conglomerate of different communities spread across different geographical areas, having distinct rituals and practices, all tied together through a common but delicate thread of mutual respect and coexistence, and all finding shade under the umbrella of Sanatan Dharma. Each community's temples are central to upholding that community's religious and cultural practices and preserving its unique identity. Destroy the temples and you destroy that community's culture and heritage. Because with the temples gone, there is no one to uphold the community's religious rituals, and these communities then become vulnerable to religious proselytization and forceful conversions. Now you might think India has thousands of temples. In fact, every city in ancient India was supposed to be built around a temple. But how many such temples are even functional? Let us return to the example of Tamil Nadu, which is supposed to have the maximum number of temples anywhere in this country. If out of 44,000 temples, 37,000 do not even have the money to appoint a caretaker, and 12,000 out of these 37,000 do not even have the money to perform their daily puja, you can imagine the plight of the rest of the country. In fact, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many pujaris did not even have the money for a meal, let alone perform a puja. Now, Hindus are happy to contribute towards feeding their pujaris, but what is the point if all of their donations to the temple are going to be utilized to build a flyover? On the other hand, the Indian government claims that it cannot free temples for 3 reasons. Firstly, because it wants to ensure that temple funds are not mismanaged. Secondly, because it believes that important artifacts and idols will go missing if temples are managed privately. Thirdly, even if it wanted to free temples from state control, who would manage temples instead? But the stance of the government is contradictory here. Firstly, coming back to Tamil Nadu, if a majority of temples don't have the money to hire a caretaker or perform a puja, on what basis can the government claim that there is a possibility of mismanagement of funds? How can there be mismanagement of funds when there are no funds to begin with in the first place? Some of these temples have an income of less than 1,000 rupees a month, which in today's day is a very nominal amount. Where is the possibility of mismanagement here? Secondly, if preservation of idols is the issue, there is nothing to suggest that the government has managed to successfully secure temple idols in this country. Because if corruption in the management of temple affairs is what we're afraid of, there's perhaps nobody more corrupt than the state itself. Moreover, not only are temples vandalized, the government itself is responsible for demolishing temples over 300 years old, either on grounds of encroachment or on the ground of building a tourist corridor for a bigger temple. For example, in Puri, 17 ancient mathas have been destroyed and razed to the ground to build a Jagannath temple corridor. Some of these mathas had centuries-old architecture that is now lost to history forever. Does this not smack of mismanagement, which is apparently the very reason that the government cannot return control of temples to its communities? Naturally, hardly any of these temples have the money to hire legal help to efficiently represent themselves in court before being demolished. And thirdly, the government would do well to remember that temples in this country have always been managed through a decentralized community model. Are you telling me that a 5,000-year-old civilization needs schooling on how to manage temples it has preserved so far? The only reason that the temples are in this boat today is because of Mughal invasions, British invasions, and now mismanagement by the Indian government. To suggest that the community is incapable of handling the temple is offensive to say the least. In any case, at least those temples where communities are capable of appointing a trustee should be handed back to them. Why does the government continue to squeeze out the little money such temples have? The Supreme Court has said that where there is mismanagement of temples, the government may interfere to cure that mismanagement and then step aside and leave the temple to be managed by the devotees. But what we are seeing today is a disturbing trend where bureaucrats seem to be taking illegal control of these temples, which is leading to the slow death of an ancient civilization that is Bharat. Freeing temples does not hurt any non-Hindu community and only assists in preserving our diversity. If freed, temples have the potential to rise to their former glory, to support local artisans, to ensure the growth of Indian music and dance, to support sports and martial arts, maintain and manage libraries, invest in Hindu scholarship, and so much more. Look, temples should have been free from state control the moment we received independence from the British. It is no wonder that even after 75 years, we haven't managed to restore our country to a semblance of its pre-colonial glory. Because the rise and fall of Hindu temples is the rise and fall of Bharat. Until our temples remain shackled, Bharat cannot be free.